Hi there. Today I want to talk to you about compost tea. There's a lot of videos and information out there about compost tea, but today I want to take a little bit different approach, and I want to show you a much, what I believe is a much simpler, easier, and less expensive way to make a tea bubbler. Generally speaking, you're going to take some sort of a mesh bag, like a paint strainer bag or some kind of filter bag, and you're going to mix your compost or your worm castings. You're going to mix it into your bag, and you're going to suspend it inside of your bucket, and you're going to put air hoses, air bubblers down inside, fill it with water, and the airflow is going to oxygenate your compost and make compost tea. You're going to have these dead areas, these anoxic areas in the middle of this. I think the best method, and this is where I'm heading with this, is to get air underneath the compost water mixture. By keeping that air baffle underneath, you're going to get good oxygenation, and you're going to get good turbulence in the water, so you don't have any stagnant areas that don't get mixed up well and oxygenated. So all I've done is I've taken a sheet of styrofoam like you would use for shipping or whatever, and I took my bucket and stuck it on the sheet. We're going to do this. I'm going to show you how easy it is. And I traced my bucket onto the sheet, and then I took me a little jigsaw, or you could use a coping saw, and cut just a little bit larger on the outside of that mark. And so this is what we end up. All I've done here is took a nail and a pair of pliers, and took a little propane torch, heated my nail, and just poked me a row of holes going here and here, made a little star pattern with holes, and then I've got me a little hole here for my air hose to go under. And so all that we do here is we insert this down inside of our bucket, stick our air underneath, put on our water and our compost on the top, and we've got a really good sealed air baffle underneath our mixture. And so that's what we're going to do next, is sort of demonstrate this. I've got one of my little baffles that I've made, air baffles made out of styrofoam, and all we're going to do is just take our air hose and we're going to insert it underneath like so, where it's kind of sitting over the bottom. We're going to take it and we're going to push the edges down. Just gently push the edges all the way down. So I'm just pushing down gently on the edge, and you should feel a little bit of resistance as you do, meaning you've cut it a little bit larger. So we've got a little hump in the middle where our air will congregate. And all I did was I took a little piece of metal that, in this case, I just made it out of a yard sign, and took some wire cutters and measured it and cut the end, because what's going to happen when you add a lot of water into here and you get a lot of air bubbles going, that styrofoam is going to have a lot of pressure to float up. So I'm going to take this and use it as a little spring to hold this in place. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so we've added water and we've got it bubbling away here, and you can see that I've got air bubbles coming up pretty much in the middle right now. And the neat thing about this is that you can let this sit, as we'll demonstrate when we go to make our compost tea. You can just let this sit for a few hours in one spot, and the bubbles will kind of evenly distribute themselves. They'll kind of move around anyhow. Underneath, and then by doing that you'll be able to move the bubbles around to wherever you want them if you have a spot that's been sitting still, and in doing so you'll keep your mixture without having any dead spots in it. We're going to now use some worm castings to make our compost tea. And I use worm castings instead of regular compost because it has a higher microbial population, and it's more beneficial to make compost tea with. And I'm going to demonstrate this using my new Easy Roll worm compost bin, which I've designed, and I have some plans on YouTube for this. So we'll start off just taking the top off and looking down inside of the bin here, and what we're going to have is we're going to have a population of we're going to have all of our food on the top, our kitchen scraps and our carbon-based stuff like cardboard and whatever, and we're going to have, I've got quite a few worms working in the top layers, top several inches of this thing. This bin's been set up for a few months now, and I've got quite a bit of compost in it. You can see all the red worms I have working like crazy up in the top layers of this thing, and I'm adding quite a few pounds of food a week, and they're just gobbling it up. And the bottom layers are going to be the finished compost that we're going to get to by in a minute by flipping this bin over and removing the bottom. But the top layers are getting well worked and doing a good job. So I'm going to take these rods out, and then the next thing we're going to do is after we even out the bed, is we're going to take our insert lid that we've measured to set down in there very snugly. We're going to push it down to the top of the bed, and then once we get it in there, we're going to put our rods back in the lower holes to lock the top in place. Once we get the top locked in place, then we're just going to roll this bin over, and then we're going to remove the bottom, where we're going to expose all the finished compost or the worm castings, and we'll have several inches of this stuff that we'll be able to use. And the also the nutrient level that you're going to have for your compost tea is going to depend on whether you use what you've added to your compost bin. So now what I'm doing is I'm just scraping off a nice even layer of the castings, and I'm putting them into my little cup here, and I'm getting enough just to make not quite a full 5-gallon bucket here. You can experiment to get the right mix that you want. If with this system, the neat thing about it, if you see any worms, once you flipped it over, you just leave the bottom off a little while longer, and the worms go on down. So now that we're done, we roll the bin back over and lift the lid back up, and we're done making our we're done. We've got our compost to make our compost tea. And now I'm going to add some of this wonderful worm castings got out of our compost bin, and go ahead and add it in here. I'm going to add more water here in a minute, but I just put a little bit in there to just to get it going. And next thing we're going to do, we're going to add some unsulfured molasses. It has to be unsulfured. And I'm just going to add, about, some people recommend an ounce, but I'm just going to add about a couple tablespoons. And this is food for the microbial populations. And I want to mention here that there's been some recent studies casting some doubt on the true benefit of having these enormous microbial populations, because it requires these specific circumstances to produce these populations, all of this air and all the sugars and so forth from the molasses, and so as soon as you spray these or apply them to your plants, those conditions are not going to be there, and these populations can go dormant. So there's some debate about that. However, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence suggesting the benefits of these things, and so I'm trying to shoot for middle ground here. I'm not going to let this brew quite as long as most people do, because I've had good success with it doing it just like this. So now I'm going to add the final amount of water here. I'm on a well. If you're not using well water and you're using tap water, then you're going to need to just let this clear water before you add your compost. You're going to need to let it aerate for several hours to get all the chlorine and that kind of stuff out of that.